Why did potato blight become Ireland's Great Famine instead of a severe but temporary crop failure? Because the disease struck a population whose poorest families depended on one crop, while landholding and relief rules decided whether other food could reach them. From 1845 to 1852, repeated potato failures met poverty, eviction, disease, and an aid system that kept changing shape. Around 1 million people died, and mass emigration permanently reduced the population. The first 30 seconds of this story give us the thesis: blight destroyed food, but institutions distributed the danger. Start with the potato itself. A third of Ireland's population depended heavily on it for food, according to the UK Parliament's history. For a labouring family with a small plot, potatoes produced a large amount of nutrition from limited land. That efficiency was also a trap. The household might sell labour or livestock, but the potato patch supplied the daily calories that wages did not. When blight blackened leaves and rotted tubers, the loss was not one item removed from a varied pantry. It erased the part of the household economy that made the rest possible. The failure returned over several seasons. A family could sell an animal, pawn clothing, or ask relatives for help after one bad harvest. Repetition consumed those reserves. Rent still came due. Seed had to be found for the next planting. Work became scarce because neighbors were in the same position. This is where crop disease became a balance sheet crisis inside thousands of cottages. The visible field was biological, the mechanism that carried the damage forward was economic. Prime Minister Robert Peel's government did respond in 1845. It bought £100,000 worth of Indian corn and arranged depots, while a relief commission coordinated local committees and gathered reports. Peel also moved to repeal the corn laws, which kept imported grain prices high. Those measures mattered, but they did not create an instant substitute for the potato. Corn had to be imported, milled, transported, sold, and prepared. A cheaper market price still did not help a family with no wage. Government changed in 1846, and relief changed with it. Lord John Russell's administration leaned more heavily on public works. The theory was that people would earn wages instead of receiving food without labor. In practice, hungry workers were sent to roads and other projects while payroll and food prices moved on different schedules. For example, a road crew could be counted as employed yet still wait for payment while meal prices rose. The policy tested willingness to work when the urgent problem was access to calories. Now compare two pieces of paper. A public works list recorded a labourer as eligible for wages. A distress paper sent to Dublin Castle described hunger, prices, disease, and local requests for aid. The National Archives of Ireland preserves floods of these letters and reports from 1846 onward. Together they show that officials were not operating without information. The problem was converting information into food at the right place and time. An archive can prove that a warning arrived, it cannot prove the response matched the speed of the emergency. One claim says Ireland exported food while people starved. Parliament confirms that large quantities continued to leave, mainly for Britain. That matters because the island was not empty of edible goods. But the mechanism was access. Grain, livestock, and dairy belonged to producers in a commercial system, while destitute tenants lacked money and legal control. The famine concerned entitlement as well as supply. Relief briefly became more direct in 1847. The Temporary Relief Act supported soup kitchens, and official records describe local committees distributing cooked food. This worked differently from making an exhausted person break stones before receiving wages. It put calories closer to the need. But the system was temporary, and policy shifted again toward the poor law. The catch was capacity. Institutions designed for ordinary poverty were asked to absorb a national disaster. Ireland's 1838 Poor Law had divided the country into unions centered on workhouses. The National Archives notes that the system was originally designed to support about 1% of the population, roughly 80,000 people. By March 1851, nearly 4% of the population had been forced into workhouses. A workhouse offered institutional relief, but admission could split families, carry stigma, and expose people weakened by hunger to crowded disease conditions. A safety net built to deter dependence was a poor fit for simultaneous mass collapse. Financing sharpened the crisis. Parliament placed more of the relief burden on Irish landowners and local rates. Owners facing rising charges had an incentive to remove tenants who could no longer pay rent. Eviction then severed a family's remaining link to a plot, shelter, and local support. One policy cost led to another private response, and that response produced more people needing relief. This feedback loop is what matters. The system did not merely fail to catch households after they fell, parts of it made the fall harder to reverse. Hunger was only one killer. Malnutrition weakened immunity, while fever and dysentery spread among displaced people, road workers, crowded workhouses, and emigrants. Contemporary testimony and government reports repeatedly joined famine with disease. That distinction improves the evidence. Death totals cannot be read as a list of people who simply found no food on one day. They record a chain in which failed crops, low income, exposure, infection, and delayed relief acted together. What reliable sources let us say, and where should we stop? The blight was necessary to the immediate disaster, but it does not explain the scale by itself. Continued food movement does not mean every exported sack could simply have been seized and distributed without consequences. Relief was not absent. Peel's corn purchase, local committees, public works, soup kitchens, and workhouses all existed. The record instead supports a stricter conclusion: aid was fragmented, conditional, repeatedly reorganized, and too limited for a crisis striking millions at once. This matters today because disasters still travel through systems that look neutral on paper. A crop can fail, a port can remain open, a dashboard can show available supply, and families can still go hungry if prices, ownership, transport, or eligibility block access. Search for the Irish famine and the potato will dominate the images. Look at the archive, the workhouse register, the eviction map, and the population chart, and a different pattern appears. The biological shock opened the crisis. Policy and property determined who had room to survive it. The point is not to erase the fungus or replace it with one political slogan. It is to keep the causal chain intact. Blight destroyed the staple. Dependence removed the buffer. Relief rules slowed or conditioned access. Local finance rewarded eviction. Disease multiplied the deaths. Emigration carried the consequences across generations. When a modern emergency is described as a natural disaster, which part of the outcome is actually being decided by rules people wrote? For more evidence-led stories like this, like the video and subscribe. See you in the next one.